The ERA, also known as the century-old promise that women have been waiting on, sort of. Welcome back to Stay at Home Feminist. Your soft girl era starts here, along with the fall of the patriarchy. I'm your host, CC Binx, your favorite feminist with a TikTok addiction. And today we are diving into the Equal Rights Amendment, or as I like to call it, the legal unicorn that women have been chasing for over 100 years. Can someone explain to me why women still don't have equal rights in the US? Like, come on. I mean it. Obviously, we know it's because of the patriarchy and because men thrive on that power, but but anyways, I really wanted to talk about the ERA today because I feel like this is such an important part of American history, especially when we're talking about how the structures of white supremacy and the patriarchy run rampant here. And I just feel like this is a part of history that is just sort of like glossed over or ignored. And it can be one of those things that women often don't want to ask about because they don't want to seem dumb. Like, I think there are certain things that at a certain age, if you haven't learned about it yet, you're sort of just like, I'm just gonna like ignore that. And let's not ignore it. It's important that we understand and talk about the ERA and what went wrong and why things are the way they are today. So let's set the stage. What you need to know is that the ERA has been in the works since 1923, so officially over a century since we are in 2025. And to put that into perspective, that is 20 years before McDonald's started serving fries, okay? Yet somehow we still don't have a ratified Equal Rights Amendment. Today we're going to talk about why, what's at stake, and just sort of a little bit of an Equal Rights Amendment 101. Let's just see what it even is. Again, I hope that anyone who's watching this who doesn't know much about it feels confident talking about it and maybe even advocating about it after this episode. So I think we should all be alarmed that something as seemingly simple as equal rights for women have been stuck in Congress since longer than McDonald's lifespan. Before we dive into the failure, which is the present moment, how did we get here? Rewind. Okay, quick little history moment. While they still allow us to talk about gendered history. It's funny because it's true. What even is the ERA? The Equal Rights Amendment is a proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So they want to add on a new amendment to the Constitution. And this amendment would say that everybody should have equal rights in America, regardless of their sex or gender. It's basically meant to ensure that gender equality is a constitutional right, not a suggestion. And when we think about things that go up to the Supreme Court, cases like that, laws and situation that are sort of like set as precedent through Supreme Court rulings, but also just like generally, it would give courts stronger foundation to vote against or strike down policies or laws that are in nature discriminatory on the basis of gender. So unless you don't want women to have equal rights, there's no reason why you wouldn't be pro-ERA. It's really that simple. The ERA was first introduced in 1923, yes, over a century ago, and it passed in Congress in 1972. But even though it passed in Congress, it is not officially a part of the Constitution. This is because of ratification delays and political roadblocks. So why has there been half a century of legal limbo for the ERA? Well, although the ERA was first introduced in 1923 by suffragist icon Alice Paul, and it was passed in 1972 by Congress, it didn't get ratified by enough states by the original deadline. Side note, and it's just a little footnote in this episode because we have talked about Phyllis Schlafly in other episodes, but I would be remiss not to mention her while talking about the ERA. Phyllis Schlafly was a pick-me who weaponized fears around femininity and tradition to block the ERA. She was essentially campaigning that if women had equal rights, they would become men. They would be forced into combat during drafts. They would abandon homemaking, God forbid. And basically that women would lose all their femininity and stop being women just because they had equal rights. Which, like, did she stretch before she jumped to those conclusions? Because, like, girl is going to pull a hamstring leaping into those conclusions. But the patriarchy was like, yes, ma'am, and totally supported her. And she really did a number. She rose politically through the ranks, which is kind of ironic because shouldn't she have been busy homemaking? And really did a number on blocking it and convincing women it was bad for them. One of the most terrifyingly fascinating things, it's sort of like when I watch a murder, like a true crime series, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to know this information, but like, tell me everything. I feel the same way about moments in history. We see it, unfortunately, a lot today, where people are tricked, convinced, propagandized into voting or supporting things against their best interests. We see it so much today with the way that this administration's policies are targeting immigrants. A lot of immigrants were very pro-Trump because Trump ran on policies saying, we're going to get these super duper violent, straight out the asylum, the mental asylum, because he doesn't know the difference between seeking asylum and like a physical asylum, but that's a different thing. Hannibal Lecter types, we're going to get these gang members, we're going to get these violent criminals, and we're going to get them the F out of this country. And immigrants are like, good, we came from violent criminals. We don't want violent criminals here. I'll vote for that. Heck yeah. Only to realize is that what he considered a violent criminal was someone with DACA, someone who came here as an asylum seeker, someone who came here undocumented, but now it's going through the proper channels. So that's just a brief example of how easy it can be to convince someone to vote against their best interests. Looking at it now, you're like, why would an immigrant vote for that? Why is Trump locking up the immigrants that voted for him? But that, I fear, has been going on since the dawn of time. And we see it a lot today. And we've seen it a lot then. And that is one of the reasons the ERA has not passed, because Phyllis Schlafly convinced women that equal rights would somehow be bad for them. So why does it matter? What could the ERA change today if the ERA was ratified and put into the Constitution? Most notably, the ERA could offer constitutional foundation for gender equality, meaning laws and court decisions would have to treat women as equals. It could be a powerful tool in the fight against pay discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, and gender-based violence. Some pretty important things. It could also bolster reproductive rights. For example, if gender equality is a constitutional right and only one gender's privacy, healthcare, etc., rights are being infringed upon, forced pregnancy would be more likely, in my opinion, to be seen as a violation of equality under the law, which, let's be so for real, that's what it is. When we have so much anti-women propaganda out there, anti-women laws, when women's rights are being rolled back, like day by day, now more than ever, I feel like it's so important for the Equal Rights Amendment to be ratified, for women not to be discriminated against, and for women to be protected. So what's the tea? Why hasn't the Equal Rights Amendment been ratified yet? If it was signed into Congress in the 70s, how come it's still not a part of our Constitution? There was a 38 state threshold, meaning 38 states had to sign the ERA to ratify it. That threshold was met in 2020 when Virginia finally ratified the ERA. But Trump, who was president at the time, and his DOJ said, too late, because there was a ratification deadline. And considering that this came to be in 1923, no surprise that by 2020, that deadline had expired. In 2021, the House voted to remove the deadline, but the Senate blocked that. And while in office, the Biden administration supported the ERA, but didn't prioritize it legislatively. And the Supreme Court has remained silent on its enforceability. Conservative lawmakers and justices argue that the Equal Rights Amendment is just not necessary, which is pretty rich coming from people who have never had to prove their worth as a human being in court, but okay, I guess. So knowing the state of our politics, this shouldn't really surprise anyone. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know how I feel about the patriarchy and the chokehold it has on American society. So with that being said, let's talk about why the ERA is still stuck in limbo and who's benefiting from that. Let's be for real. The ERA is an existential threat to the patriarchy. A lot of the people who vote on these kinds of issues benefit way too much from things staying unequal. The ERA is stuck in limbo because every time women get close to constitutional equality, suddenly it's too complicated, too late, or just not necessary, which I read as this being something that threatens these mediocre men at the top. Think about it. If gender equality were locked into the Constitution, you couldn't just brush off pay gaps. You couldn't just ignore gender-based violence. And you wouldn't be able to just treat reproductive health care like a debate club topic. You'd have to actually hold people accountable. And spoiler alert, you would actually have to treat women as human beings and not as second-class citizens. And the patriarchy hates that. America hates that. America's got a problem. Dun, 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 dun. So who is benefiting? I mean, obviously, those who are benefiting from the patriarchy, corporate bosses who pay women less, lawmakers who want to control women's bodies because they don't want women to be powerful enough to make decisions about their family, their future, their economic status, who they marry and stay with, and all these institutions that constantly rely on women's unpaid labor while simultaneously trying to tell us that we're super empowered and it's great, rah, rah, rah. They don't want the Equal Rights Amendment passed because it would mean bare minimum finally becomes non-negotiable. In a post-Roe world, I feel like the ERA matters now more than ever. As soon as Roe was overturned, women lost the right to access life-saving healthcare, along with like privacy rights and so much more like that across the United States. Attacking trans rights have been on the rise, and women in marginalized genders need more than just like good vibes. We need legal power. We have an extremist Supreme Court right now that overturned Roe v. Wade. I have been advocating for women's rights, for abortion rights, for reproductive justice for like 10 years at this point. And when Brett Kavanaugh had his SCOTUS hearing, and I was like advocating and saying like, guys, we need to make sure this doesn't happen because he will help overturn Roe. People were like, that's crazy talk. America would never do that. Women are equal here. They care about women, da, 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 making it sound like I was like this alarmist. And now we like casually have the fall of Roe and we're just like, move it on. And Trump's been reelected and it's gone from bad to worse. Like, women are not safe in America, point blank, period. And as we've seen, without constitutional equality, every victory can be temporary. Court precedent can shift. Legislation can be repealed. But the ERA would raise the floor for women and for gender equality. Globally, the US is one of the few countries that hasn't codified gender equality into their constitution. That's embarrassing. Do you know that America calls themselves the leader of the free world? Dead ass. We are out there being like, we are the leader of the free world. Yet you're not free in the US. Not if you're a woman who needs an abortion. Not if you're a trans person. The ERA would make it official that gender equality is a right. And right now, it's not. You don't have to treat women equally. You don't in America. Which means that women's rights, our rights, such as abortion access, fair pay, protection from discrimination, protection from DV, these rights are constantly under attack. And there's no clear guarantee that the law has to protect us. Without the ERA, our rights can just continue to be rolled back. With the ERA, we make equality a starting point, not some privilege that we have to keep begging for. And as we see Project 2025 become the roadmap for policies, the rights at risk are not just theoretical. They're coming for everything we fought for. And the ERA could step in. As I've said, without Roe, states are already banning abortion. Project 2025 has plans to go further, limiting birth control, IVF, and even emergency contraception. The ERA would give us a constitutional tool to argue that forcing pregnancy or denying reproductive health care is gender-based discrimination, which, let's be real, it is. What about the equal pay of it all? How does that tie into Project 2025's agenda? Well, they're not trying to just stall equal pay. They're trying to erase it. They want to just control, alt, delete it from the entire conversation. Because Project 2025 pushes traditional family structures over fairness and equality. The ERA would strengthen legal cases around pay discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, and workplace harassment. And again, with Project 2025 leading the way, it's important to know what we're dealing with here. Because saying you're pro-family shouldn't rub people the wrong way. Who doesn't want to support families? I do so much in my personal life to support working families, domestic violence survivors, women and kids. Who's not pro-family? Children are the way of the future, for sure. Very matriarchal, except not the way that Project 2025 is flipping it and reversing it. Project 2025 pushes the idea that a woman's highest calling is to be a wife and to be a mother, not to be a worker, not to be a leader, not to be a decision maker. They say they want to strengthen the family, but are doing nothing, but they have no policy or no agenda that actually wants to support working families. This administration is cutting back free school lunches and so many other benefits and Social Security that low-income families were receiving. So they don't want to help families. They're actively harming families. What they do want to do is push women out of the workforce and back into the kitchen, without saying it like that, obviously, because of optics. But Project 2025 is making the argument that policy should encourage traditional gender roles, which means rewarding households where men work and women don't. It's giving Architects of Gilead. It's giving Serena and Fred Waterford. Okay? And because I hate just hanging out in the theoretical, here are specific ways that Project 2025 undermines women's economic equality. Number 1, cutting access to childcare and paid leave. Project 2025 opposes federal investment to childcare. By the way, we're in a childcare crisis right now since the pandemic that we haven't recovered from in America. So childcare in the US is like not in a good place. And they're saying like, give them less money, give them less support. If you cared about families, why would you do that? Why? Why would you do that? Because if childcare is expensive and hard to access, aka you're living in a childcare desert or you just can't afford it, more women are gonna choose to stay home. It's not a choice if you can't afford the alternative, but okay. Project 2025 also wants to end federal mandates for paid family leave. The second way they are doing this is by attacking DEI policies. Project 2025 wants to eliminate DEI initiatives, and well on their way to doing so. We've seen it in the way that DEI has been slashed from federal agencies and publicly funded institutions. I saw that medical schools could lose their funding if they talk about like the way that race plays into like medical things, like acknowledging racism and like the health disparities that causes, like they could lose their funding for that. Eek! The targeting of DEI is intentional. It means fewer protections around gender-based discrimination, race-based discrimination, and fewer accountability measures for harassment, and more room for biased hiring and for biased pay practices to flourish. The third way Project 2025 is doing this is that they are working to undermine Title IX and workplace protections. Project 2025 is pushing to rewrite Title IX to exclude gender identity, which is like the whole point of Title IX, but okay. And remove its requirement in schools and workplaces to address sexual harassment or gender-based violence. That's insane. The less we are protected, the more harm people can do. And that is the whole MO here. Not to mention that it might encourage women to opt out of male-dominated spaces if they don't have workplace protections for their own safety. Do you see the pattern here? Do you catch the drift? And the fourth, I was going to say and final, but it's only final for my list. There are other ways, but the fourth way and the final way for my list, but there are more ways they're doing this, is by promoting a one-income household through tax policy. Project 2025 wants to reintroduce tax breaks for one-income households, specifically where the woman doesn't work, aka financially rewarding inequality. If staying at home saves you more money than working, the system is rigged. Why does this matter? Well, first of all, this isn't random. This is strategic. If you keep women financially dependent, underpaid, or constantly battling discrimination, you keep them tired, quiet, and locked out of power. Ever heard of the glass ceiling? Like, they want to lower the glass ceiling, essentially, is what we're seeing. The ERA would treat this kind of structural gender bias as unconstitutional, not just like unfortunate, unconstitutional. We need that. Without the ERA, women are being forced to choose between survival and fairness. With the ERA, we get the power to fight for both. So what can we do about it? If it's been over 100 years, it's pretty easy to be like, well, that's not going to happen. Here's your feminist homework for the week or month or however long you take it. We're procrastinators here, but we're powerful. So do it when you can. Number 1, has your state ratified the ERA? Just know that. Learn that. Go Google that. If you know that, you know things. We like to know things. Number 2, homework. The second item on our homework agenda, pressure elected officials to support removing their ratification deadline. Remember, it passed in Congress, but it was blocked by the Senate. So we could get it passed by Congress and the Senate again, because it has been ratified by enough states. It's just, we need to remove the deadline. The third call to action, feminist homework for this week, is when in doubt, support legal advocacy groups. For this case, especially for groups that are pushing for judicial recognition of the ERA. The ERA is about all of us and the people who come after us. Let's make it easier for the next generation to fight less and live more. I don't want my children to have less rights than I do. My mom's children have less rights than she did. I don't want that to be the trend. And I know I'm not alone in that. So yeah, have a little Google. What can you do to help push the ERA forward in your state or on a federal level? A few things I would do if I was looking for where to start is, first of all, don't let anyone tell you it's too late. We can cry over spilt milk. The patriarchy thrives on making us feel powerless. We're not. We know that. So here's how we can push the ERA forward, state by state, voice by voice, person by person. Number 1, call your representatives loudly, annoyingly, repeatedly. Call them. Demand that your state and federal lawmakers support removing ERA ratification deadlines, as well as formally recognizing it as the 28th Amendment. Scripts work. Find a script if you need it. So do rage-filled voicemails, but I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying to call loudly, annoyingly, and repeatedly. The second thing you can do, join or support local ERA coalitions. Most states have coalition groups that are fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. Find them, volunteer, donate, show up, repost what they're posting. It all matters. There's no amount of help that is too small. Third thing you can do is educate your girls, educate your community, educate your family. Talk to your friends, coworkers, your book club. Talk to your gym crush. Talk to whoever you can about the ERA. Most people don't even know gender equality isn't in the Constitution. And that's not your fault, but it is your opportunity to spread the word. Fourth thing I recommend you do is use your platforms, big or small. Social media is a powerful tool. We've seen that. Post about the ERA, share resources, repost. Honestly, if that's all you do, like share, not to shamelessly self-promote, but like share this with a friend. Share this with a friend, or again, follow ERA coalitions and just repost shit that they're posting. It's easy peasy. If that's all you do, it's still helpful. And fifth and final, ask candidates real questions that actually matter. If someone's running for office, let's find out whether they support the ERA. If they'd answer on the answer, they don't deserve your vote. So what do you think about the ERA? Did you learn stuff from this episode? Because I feel like there's so much more I could talk about. I wanted to do like a little lay of the land, get the feelers. I really didn't know that much about the ERA, but when Biden's last term in office, towards the end of his last term, there was a big push for him to add the ERA to the Constitution. And that's when I was like, wait, what is the ERA? I know I had heard about it and I knew it was like equal rights and I knew about the Phyllis Schlafly drama, but I like didn't really know that much about it. And so it wasn't until I started researching for this episode that I was like, oh, that sucks. Oh. I didn't really know it was like that. And I wonder if listeners kind of felt that same way too, because I just feel like this is like kind of an enigma. It's one of those things that you probably heard about, but don't know much about. So there's a lot more. All that to say is there's a lot more I could yap about with the ERA. I just wanted to give us like a lay of the land 101. What's the 411? What's the HAPs? Anyways, thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. And that's a wrap on today's episode about the Equal Rights Amendment. If I said the ERA in any other form of letters, I'm dyslexic. So if I'm saying like the ARE or like weird shit, don't mind me. I'm dyslexic. I mean, Equal Rights Amendment. If ever I'm saying any combination of ERA this episode, that's what I meant. I'm dyslexic. Leave dyslexic girls alone. Don't come for me. With all that said, thanks for joining. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, follow, do all the things. And I hope to see you next week. We're going to answer the question nobody really wants to answer, but we have to. Do you actually like him, or do you just want him to like you? I fear it might be the latter, my love. So I hope to see you next week where we will be breaking down the difference between a real connection and craving validation. We will be calling out the unpaid labor women do in relationships. You know I love to talk about that. And we will be unpacking why some modern relationships feel like a 9-to-5 with no benefits and no pay. Hate to see it. I hate that for my girls. So if you've ever bent backwards for a man who couldn't even send you a good morning text, this one's for you. See you there. Until next time, keep smashing the patriarchy. Go find out if your state has ratified the ERA. Here's to me, here's to you, and here's to all of our rights. Bye.